Welcome back to our second part of the video on Swinz's attention diversion strategy and how it can be applied to business negotiations. We talked about the ancient background of this strategy in our last video, and we will focus more on how I applied this strategy to my negotiations in this video. I will always remember my long-winded negotiation with another startup founder, in particular how I managed to negotiate a great set of terms and conditions despite being in a weaker position. Let's call this startup founder Peter. The reason we were stuck at a negotiation table together is because we both have similar relocation and property businesses, and we figured out it will be better if we merged our operations together for a win-win. At that time when I started negotiations with Peter, I had only 1/5 the customers he had, not to mention that he had far more business connections than me as a more experienced entrepreneur, including property developers, real estate agents, etc. He was a smart guy as well, and he could tell I did not have as much bargaining power as he had. As human nature dictates, he began offering partnership terms that would significantly benefit him more, such as entitling him to a 2/3 split in any profit we make together, as well as demanding a much larger stake than I. I figured out that I was going to be totally murdered by him and my negotiations continued the way it went. So the only option for me was to increase my leverage and make Peter feel that I actually have more power than he thought I had. I decided to employ the attention diversion strategy and brought in a second person into the negotiations with him. He was one of my most trusted contacts within the property sector. Let's call this second contact Bill. Before we continue on this video, I'd just like to tell you guys that I, the founder of Life Solvers, and my team of professional business negotiators have been appointed by top company executives and individuals before to provide professional negotiation and HR training and consulting. For more information, just look at the description and feel free to drop me an email or WhatsApp. Let's continue the video. Now that Bill is negotiating with me as a team, instead of focusing on profit and ownership of our new venture, I forced Peter to listen to what Bill had to say about my track record as an entrepreneur and the amount of revenue I have brought in for Peter. Bill positioned himself as a business advisor for me, and with both of our expertise and connections, Peter's attention was diverted. Instead of asking for more profit split and ownership of the new firm, Peter was basically forced into a corner to accept my joint offer with Bill. Instead of only owning 1/3 of the new venture as I was offered before, Peter and I would split the profit and each hold a stake of 50-50, whereas I will separately give Bill a consultancy fee from my pocket. Looking back to this case, had Peter been more demanding and persisted with the original offer he gave me, I would have taken the initial offer, since Peter's connections are actually hugely beneficial to me. However, Peter's attention got diverted when I introduced somebody new to the negotiations, which derailed his original negotiation strategy. One of my most other successful negotiations to date, which involved the use of an attention diversion strategy, is my commercial negotiations with several independent schools in the UK, where I was negotiating for a higher retainer for the marketing services I was providing for them. The reason these schools wanted my help is because I could help them reach a larger overseas audience, so as to recruit more international students. Again, I was faced with a situation where the schools thought they have more financial power and leverage over me, and they did not shy away from repeatedly bringing up the fact that they had other options. They could choose from other marketing service providers. Again, instead of convincing them that I had a lot of experience, connections, expertise, blah blah blah, I went into attention diversion mode immediately and shifted the negotiations focus to my own business worries. I intentionally showed vulnerability by mentioning that parents have more and more choices nowadays to choose from, and that it is getting harder to showcase our brand value and catching the parents' attention without a larger budget. I then told them straight up that I could only work with schools that had a larger budget, otherwise it would have been a lose-lose for both my firm and the school. I successfully got these schools to worry about my legit concern through showing vulnerability, whilst shifting away their focus from profit and money to something more emotional. I got them to value me as a person instead of treating me as another business whose primary concern was profit. The lesson I think people can learn from this is that hostile negotiations can turn into sessions of authentic sharing if we learn to divert attention. If you feel your opponent getting uptight, serious, and defensive, divert their attention to talk about something else. Make them treat you as a real person. Or basically, just do anything to get them to focus on the issues that you want them to focus on. Negotiations are a psychological game of tug and war, and winners are often those who can get their opponent to understand their perspective the best. Negotiation winners never become too emotionally involved in negotiations, but rather calculated thinkers who can strategize a way to shift their opponent's focus away. A major benefit of this attention diversion strategy is that you can get what you want in negotiations with minimal threats and confrontation. It is human nature to become more uptight when faced with threats, especially in business negotiations, and you risk derailing negotiations and even a business relationship by being confrontational. With this strategy, when employed correctly, you can even get your negotiation opponent to think from your perspective, giving you a better than expected negotiation outcome more times than not. It is also hard for your opponent to realize that you're using the slightly deceptive trick. Unlike popular negotiation tactics like good cop, bad cop. In my experience, good negotiators can prevent opponents from overthinking and second-guessing your motives, but instead genuinely feel that you are raising demands and negotiating in good faith, which is not difficult to do. Enough of the positives. Let's take a look at some negatives. Although I'm tactically mindful in negotiations, it is important not to overthink. Only employ the attention diversion strategy if it gives you more leverage or an upper hand in negotiations. It is not easy to come up with perfect attention diversion strategy, and it may not always work. That's why I tend not to employ this tactic when I think I'm getting good enough terms in a negotiation. There's no point prolonging negotiations unless absolutely necessary, and the longer a negotiation takes, the higher the chance that something unexpected happens. Another challenge is the implementation of the strategy. To formalize a strategy to divert your opponent's attention, you must first understand what your opponent is truly after in a negotiation. Skilled negotiators are great at hiding part of their motivations. It can take years of experience and countless negotiations to figure out this accurately. If you can't truly understand what your opponent is after, you will have very little luck using this strategy. When implementing this strategy, the hard bit is to confidently articulate your demands and steer negotiations into another direction. Since many components are involved in formalizing such a strategy, you can easily confuse yourself when it comes to the implementation of this strategy. Failing to articulate what you want confidently can be interpreted as a sign of weakness by your opponent, which may spell further trouble in your attempts to take control of negotiation proceedings. You must be confident in what you are doing and follow through what you have planned. Playing around with your opponent's mind is not easy to do, not to mention that it can become unethical if you overdo it. If you wish to employ this attention diversion strategy in future negotiations, our recommendation for you is to carefully analyze the negotiation stage you are at with your opponent and clearly figure out the leverage each has over the other. If you feel that your opponent is getting tired of further negotiations, be careful of using the strategy, since again, prolonging negotiations are not usually the best thing to do unless you are certain you can gain an upper hand. In addition, if you don't know what options your opponent has and how he or she truly feels about how the negotiations are going, employing the strategy prematurely may not work and can cloud your judgment. Tactics are important in negotiations, but do not overanalyze and over-strategize to the point that even you become confused about what you are after. When employing the strategy, you must be 100% certain about your negotiation goal and not become discouraged if your opponent does not seem to fall for your trick. Hope this gives you a new perspective on negotiations. Stay tuned for more of these fascinating insights on negotiation tactics and strategies.